Well, howdy folks, it's Matthew, your friendly neighborhood technician here, making another video for you out of Boise, Idaho. And we are getting ready to make the final repair on this 2003 Volkswagen Passat with a 1.8 liter engine. Now this is the one that timing job was done on it. It was driven for a little bit. The timing tensioner failed. I've got a new timing tensioner. And we also found that the crankshaft is damaged. We're still speculating about how this crankshaft got damaged. Myself and one of my mentors suspect that when this tensioner failed, it allowed some slop. It allowed this to move back and forth, and it's what caused this, or the gear itself just old and wore out. Let's go look at the gear real quick. And here it is. As you can see, the gear right here. This is a weird setup because the key, it's not separate. It's stamped and part of the gear. And I've spoken with some other VW owners who said this is actually more common than what you know on this type of design, and that this is just what happens. So again, I have 20 years experience. My mentor has 50 years experience. He said he's seen it before, and honestly, it's kind of just a luck of the draw, and you really won't know unless you pull this gear off and start looking at this keyway to see if it's wore out and all that other stuff. So moving forward with it, we tried to decide, well, what's the best way to fix it without having to buy another engine that costs $1,000+ or having to pull that crankshaft out and put a new crankshaft in there, which again costs like $1,000+ and is a lot of work. So what we ultimately decided to do was to drill holes. And as you can see on this old gear, I used it as a practice run, was to drill holes through the timing gear on into the crankshaft, as you can see. And what I've done is I precision drilled them, and I'll show you how I did that. And then what we're gonna do is I've got a new timing gear, because you can see there's still a little bit of a lip here, okay? So I've got a new timing gear that fits right in here. It still has a little bit of play, so to make sure it doesn't have any play, we went ahead and drilled holes through everything straight into the crankshaft, and I'm going to install steel dowel pins. And those 3 steel dowel pins are what's gonna hold that gear and keep it from moving back and forth. And I'm basically gonna glue it all back together with JB Weld. So let's go look at some things real quick. Okay, so here we are. Here's the new gear, and as you can see, I've got the dowel pins in it, and it's got the new keyway stamped in it. So we got a new keyway, right? And what we did was, and again, I've had some help from some of my mentors that have 30 and 50 years experience and access to some really cool tools. So what we originally did here was we took measurements of the gear, of the hub here. We took the measurement here, and then we took the measurement on the inside here. A good friend and mentor of mine then used a laser cutting machine with those measurements and cut me out a template. I then glued that template on to my new gear, and I used my punches, right? I just took a punch, and as you can see, it's been measured out where to go ahead and make my holes. So I took my punch and I just smacked the heck out of it with a hammer. So that way, when I started to drill, my drill wouldn't walk, and I can center those holes pretty well. I then took my gear Let me get these dowel pins out of here. Oh, come on. They're a pretty tight fit, so they don't want to necessarily come out. Hold on just a second. So then I took my gear and I installed it on here. And as you can see with it installed, see there's a little play because of that crankshaft being kind of messed up. Just a little play. All right, so I made sure I was all the way over to the right, because that's where the good spot is. So I made sure I was all the way over to the right. And then I took a 1/8 inch transfer punch. Now the size of these holes are 1/8 of an inch. I took a 1/8 inch transfer punch and I smacked that in there real well with my hammer, which left me with my marks on my crankshaft. And then I also went ahead and I just used my gear and I drilled through the previous drilled holes, okay? I didn't continuously drill it, I just drilled enough to get a good hole started, all right? And so I kind of used this as a jig and a template to keep my drill bit straight and true. And then once I got in there a little bit, once I felt I was into the crankshaft, I removed it so I wouldn't, you know, remount these holes, and went ahead and continued on with my cuts. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put some JB Weld in the keyway here. I'm gonna put some JB Weld on my dowel pins, and I'm gonna install this new crankshaft, and I'm gonna hammer the dowel pins in there. Alright, and actually before I JB Weld and set this permanent, I went ahead and got my gear installed, and now look at that, with those 3 dowel pins in there, there's no play in this whatsoever. So we're good to go. But before I go ahead and set this for the final time, I want to cut these dowel pins off, grind them down flush with the gear right here. So that's what I'm going to do next. Alright, so I got those shaved down pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to remove the gear and the dowel pins and go ahead and just kind of file them down so they're flush with my gear, or even if they're kind of a little past that point, if they press in a little bit, that's okay too. I just don't want them protruding out because I got to be able to install a bolt here as well. So back to the workbench. Alright, so I got the 3 steel dowel pins shaved down and fixed up so that when I install them and tap them in, they're flush here. So now it's time to go ahead and clean off the crankshaft, get this cleaned off, put a little bit of JB Weld here, and get this installed. Alright, there you go. That's what it looks like. Can't really tell if I got a good screen or not focus, but yeah, that's what it looks like. So now I'm going to install this bolt. I'm not going to torque it, I'm just going to tighten it. I want to make sure that everything is flat and true and flush and all that other good stuff. And then I'm going to leave it, I'm probably going to leave it for more than 24 hours. I'm going to leave it for a couple days. So I'm going to tighten this bolt down. And there you go, folks. That, and now there's no more play in this gear. It's solid, it's good, and that is how I fix this. So now it's a matter of letting this cure, going ahead, resetting TDC, reinstalling the timing belt, putting everything back together, and making sure this vehicle is going to run smooth. Hopefully all of this works out and we can get this vehicle back on the road soon. Well, hey everybody, thanks for following me on this journey. I'll definitely make another video with the timing belt installed and the vehicle running and all that other good stuff. Thanks for watching me and supporting me. This is Matthew, your friendly neighborhood technician, signing off.